All right. How is everybody doing today? I am excited to have a very special guest, something a little bit different than what we've been doing. He is a journalist and filmmaker who wrote and directed and narrated the documentary called The Perfect Human Diet. His name is CJ Hunt. In his documentary, he talks about his experience of a 10-year global exploration to find a solution to the exploding epidemic of overweight, obesity, and diet-related diseases. The breakthrough investigative documentary leapt to number one documentary film and number one independent film on both iTunes USA and iTunes Canada in 2013. And I do believe he just also told me it's still number one. Is that right, CJ?
No, it's back in the top 10. It went up to 4.
Okay. Awesome.
Every time it's the seventh time now.
That's really exciting because it's been out. When did it come out? What year?
Officially January 2013, right at the end of December 2012 to 13, because when it went on the internet and, television, cable, that kind of thing. It was on cable up in Canada as well and all that stuff. So yeah, that's when it officially came out, and it did really well. It was much more than I had ever expected. It was up to number one for a week until the Oscar nominations came out.
Oh.
So, and it's like, okay, I guess I'm going to get pushed out now.
But for it to be dipping around that first spot for this many years is excellent.
Well, yeah, every time people start thinking about diet time again, whenever it's Christmas and New Year's is when it comes back from wherever it is out in the void, and sometimes around in summertime as well, or when Paleo FX is going on.
Right. When people are getting their paleo on. So for those of you that don't know, CJ is all about the paleo-based diet. And this is why I've brought him in, because as much as I am totally into, finding your perfect diet for you, I do start every client I have with some sort of ancestral-based diet, whether that's paleo, ketogenic, autoimmune paleo. And I do that because it works. And today, that's what CJ and I are going to get into. It is what his film is all about. Proof that the paleo diet is not a fad diet. And you didn't come to this easily, did you, CJ? This was a 10-year hunt.
Oh yeah, it was a long journey, and it was part of it. I even had to go back to school to learn how to make documentary.
Oh, really? Oh, hold on, you're frozen here. There you are.
There I am. So, yes, now I'm green. I must be on screen, on camera now. So, yeah, it did take a long time, all with the initial research and trying to conceptualize how to go after it. And as it turned out, I needed to go back to school. So I left Los Angeles and went to San Francisco State and took documentary and radio television production. Wow. And yeah, and during the course of that, I started, working on it and developing it as best I could from not being out in the field interviewing people yet. And, because the only places I had really heard about it before was that Dr. Mike Eads, who wrote Protein Power, had a little paragraph in his book saying, well, the low-carb diet is based on this Paleolithic nutrition idea. But when that came out, of course, everyone thought you were, they ought to throw you off a cliff if you said something like that you were really whacked. So, and then I saw a newspaper article once out of Dallas that had interviewed Warren Cordain.
Right.
So that did the paleo diet. And so those were the only public things that I'd seen about it. Nobody was looking at this stuff back then.
No.
And so it
And
was,
how did you come to this? Because that's quite a story in and of itself, because that's what instigated it, right? Was in 1978?
Right. In 1978, I went jogging at Beverly Hills High School because I had hurt myself at a race. I raced motocross, which is like an off-road steeplechase on motorcycles. And it was considered one of the world's most physically demanding sports, and up there with forwards on a soccer team, I guess. And so
how old were you?
I was 24 years old.
Okay.
And I went jogging around the track, and I made it a lap and a half and promptly dropped dead. So, yeah, I know.
You don't hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. So luckily for me, within the next few minutes, a anesthesiologist showed up to go jogging because it was
No.
Memorial Day 1978. And so he kept me alive and going, gave me, you know, I can't remember anymore. He was trying to resuscitate me and taking care of my heart, and until the paramedics got there, and then they started what's called a lidocaine drip and jump started me with the
Oh my goodness.
paddles. I know, and it took a couple of times because apparently I was, making it rough on them. So, and then they transported me to UCLA Medical Center where I spent 10 days in intensive care, and I came out of that learning that I had a heart birth defect that most people, don't survive. That it's like when you hear about high school kids dropping dead on the track or on the field, and then later you hear that they had a heart problem called hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, is HOCM, and that's what it is, and it's usually pretty hard to get back. But that's really what started it, my intense search for health and well-being, and after that, I lived in Los Angeles, and paleo and those things didn't exist. Atkins was floating out there somewhere, but it was not well respected. So I went down to the local metaphysical bookstore and started reading everything about juicing and fasting and those kinds of things, and ultimately became a raw food vegan.
Wow.
For 5 years, and I did pretty good with that until my mom was killed by a drunk driver, and we were best friends, and that shook me up enough emotionally and physically that I just couldn't bounce back. And after a while, let me go woo-woo on you for a minute. My little inner voice said, eat fish.
Wow. It just
it's
some fish, damn it.
It's right. And I tell you, in the first month that I started eating protein again, and I was still eating animal proteins, and I was still eating lots of vegetables and some fruits and nuts and seeds and all the raw vegan-y kind of things. I gained 8 pounds of muscle. I felt a whole lot better, and it really turned things around for me. So that was kind of my personal beginnings on learning about healthier diets and all of that kind of stuff. But with the paleo diet specifically, that came around much, much later. And I thought, well, obesity and overweight is out of control, and it's exploding, even as it still continues to do today. But the thing is we're looking at the same places. We're going to the same registered dietitians and the same sources to try to find an answer to something that is not being answered properly, because otherwise we'd be able to reel it in a little bit. So when I dug a little deeper into this idea of the Paleolithic diet, I said, well, nobody's ever really sought this out, and no one has told this story visually, because I'm a very visual person. I had by the time I started on this, I had moved into broadcasting. I was a little older then, so I was closer to in my 40s instead of 24. So by that time I'd become a journalist. I was an anchor reporter, and so that's the way I approached it. I said, well, are we asking the right questions? Have we really dug into all the alternatives? And we really ought to try looking somewhere we haven't looked before.
It amazes me how many people don't look outside the box. Like just listening to how you came about that, like here you're following the vegan diet. It had been years. And most people are just do what they're being told by mainstream media. So for you to go outside and be like, oh, what about this Paleolithic era it's cool that you went outside that box at that time.
I've always been really curious, and I was raised by a lawyer, so I was always interested in digging in and finding the truth about something,
right?
And whether it was popular or not. And I was fascinated. I was interested in it for myself as well as for other folks. I thought it would be a great thing to pursue, because clearly and as I illustrate in the film, at that time, the people that were dying every year from overweight and obesity, it's preventable overweight and obesity, was the equivalent of a 9/11 incident like we had in New York, the Twin Towers coming down, every 3 days.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Nobody thinks that. Yeah.
No, they don't put a human face on it.
No.
They say, oh, okay, 450,000 people or whatever the numbers are now a year die of diet related causes. and which now include, of course, we know inflammatory diseases as well as cardiac problems and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and if you don't humanize it for people, they don't really get it.
No.
It just goes into a blur. It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So
that humanizes it for sure.
Well, yeah. So anyway, like I said, I ultimately, I couldn't find anybody in LA that wanted to help me with it because it wasn't really their interest. So I went back to school to learn documentary production and started working on it there. And then ultimately in 2006, which was the year before my graduation, went out during the summer of 2006 and started shooting it with school money, and a friend had kicked in a little money, and because there was no Kickstarter then.
No.
No, you either had credit cards or you knew somebody with money, or you just, luckily I had school money that I could spin towards that.
And you must have really felt like it was probably one of those things, you can correct me if I'm wrong, where it was like the idea dropped in and there was probably no stopping you. It was like, here, I'm going to go do this film. I'm going to go back to school for it. I don't know what I'm doing. Nobody's talking about this. So there had to have been some crazy like gut driving force in that.
Yeah. I think there were two things. One is that just before I went back to school, my heart condition flared up and had gotten worse. And I had been trying to, kicking this around for a while. And I thought, well, if I'm ever going to do this, I just better go now.
Because who knows what's
I didn't know
happen.
how long it was going to last. Right. So, there was that. And then also, I've just always have had an intense curiosity about these anything about diet and nutrition. It started in my motocross days, my dirt bike racing days. And, and now because of my health and the way the nation's and world's health was going, that it was also kind of a driver. Yeah. Especially I like going after things that nobody else would want to pursue or was pursuing, because, they wanted to follow the status quo more than go after that. So those were all things. And what was really interesting ultimately is that I had no idea what was going to surface.
Right.
Because with a true documentary, you don't really know everything you're going to do. It reveals itself as you go along. And I had only knew two people that I wanted to talk to. And then what happened at the end of the very first interview was, well, who you ought to go see is, and then followed by a name. Mm. From Lauren Cordain, that went to Mike Richards, who is in the film, of course, at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. And so, Lauren connected me with him, and he said, well, on your way here this summer, you ought to go to the south of France and go to this dig site that we work on every summer with our PhD students and stuff, and see where it all starts, because that's where they dig up the bones, the Neanderthals and the humans and the animals that were existing in different layers of the soil there. And then they take those bones back to the Max Planck, and there was new technology, and it's still relatively new, and it's being improved all the time, about radioisotopic analysis. And they are able to take those bones, extract the collagen from them, purify it, make sure it's really bones and not a bunch of rocks from the field, and make sure it's really from a human or really from a Neanderthal, and then they're able to run it through some tests, and they can read the nitrogen signatures and tell you exactly what they ate.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it was.
I love it.
Well, it's not a theory anymore. It's like everyone's going, well, we must have been hanging from the trees, and just we just started to happenstance to start eating meat and things like that, but mostly we were really meant to be vegetarians and things like that, and that's just not the story at all.
No.
No. When you really see this hard science, not theory anymore, these are hard science facts, that it's really an eye-opener. And it was like I said, it was completely unexpected. I had no idea I would end up there and see this. And that's ultimately one of the things that drove the film too, is because, when you're busy doing an interview like we're doing now, you don't remember half of what you were talking about. It's all over. You go, I hope that was good. And
totally. Yes.
Right. And I was looking back through the footage and stuff, and I just thought, wow,
Yeah.
wow, listen to this. And it was, so it was one of those kind of magical things that can happen when you're doing a real investigative documentary,
Yeah.
you know, versus, you know, propaganda.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. And for those that haven't watched the film, that's the journey he takes us on in this documentary is you get to go to these archaeological sites while they're digging up the bones and go into the science lab. And the guy talks about this. And it's amazing because then you can't fight that one, can you? Like you can't say, like you said, you can't say we were vegetarian after that.
Well, yeah, not if you're open to understanding and science. I mean, there's still up people clearly. It's in fact Barry Sears who did The Zone, which some people may have heard of. When I interviewed him, he just said, and it's in the film, something about that nutrition and diet is kind of like politics and religion. Is that people, they'll come forward and they'll say, well, I don't want to know the truth because I know in my heart what's right. So,
Right.
And they really hold on,
Yeah. It's
as
their
if their life
belief system.
it
It's
is.
like,
It's their belief system.
yeah.
And, so, same thing has happened with the film as happens to other people that, the vegans and vegetarians come out of the woodwork, and whether they've seen it or not,
Yeah.
they pan it, and stuff like that. I thought
Yeah.
the best one, though, was the one that said, I couldn't watch the host anymore is because he had big ears, so it's like,
Oh, that's horrible.
yeah, I know. There, your podcast says this. No one else has ever heard that story.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Oh,
It's okay. I recently had somebody tell me that to get rid of the rooster hairstyle that I had, that I looked like a rooster, I was just mortified. I thought, that's what you got from from that is my hair. It was just like that's what we get though, right? We get those.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
It's like, no, it's about what we're saying. It's not about how we look.
Yeah, it's funny, especially in this day and age, with social media and things. It's people feel it's not like they're sitting in front of you like we're at the same table, and all of a sudden they start bashing you because they don't like your haircut.
Yeah, it would never happen. No, they're hiding behind their screens, right?
Right. Often they don't even use their real name.
No, that's what yeah, exactly. So like we're just talking people that are vegan and vegetarian and any other fad diet. How then, out of all your research, can you tell us how the paleo diet does differ? That I love the football field analogy in your film. I think that's probably my favorite part. So can you explain a little bit about just how long the Paleolithic diet has been around?
Sure. Well, this is the thing, is that the story of the human species and the story of becoming human is really the introduction of eating meat and fats from the bones and the brains and all that stuff through an arc of time, which runs roughly 2.5 million years. And that eventually spawned the human species, which has been around for 150, 60,000 years or so. They figure us, Homo sapiens.
Okay.
Right. And not some earlier version where they had a different head.
Okay. The monkey body. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And things, all that kind of stuff. So that really, it's that story, and that's a long time. And it's a huge number. How do people understand it? And the only thing I had seen to date that illustrated that was someone rolling out a long piece of paper in a library, in the old dot matrix paper from computers that you could stuck together and you could roll out for 100 feet.
Yeah.
And they had little marks on it along the way saying, okay, well, this is when this species was here and we were eating this, and this species was here and we were eating this. So, but I thought, well, that's the core idea that is good, but what could I put that in that most people would understand? And almost everybody understands football, or in a football field and stuff like that. And I said, so, well, if we walk down this football field and make that marks, then it gives it some scale that people understand, and that
a visual,
yes, exactly. And and we stop along the way, as and we chit chat about well, what was happening now, what were we eating then, and until you come up to the point where everything changed with agriculture,
Right.
the advent of agriculture and the introduction of grains and those kinds
Which
of
was
things.
only 10,000 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah,
roughly.
And interestingly enough, that I was able to cover in the book, but not the film, because you only have an hour and a half. There's only so much you can talk about.
Yeah.
But that even that 10,000 year mark is a little fuzzy, because in England, for example, is that the grains and things came in a couple of waves into Europe, and the first time, at least in England, I understand. I don't really remember about the mainland, but it didn't stick. People weren't interested in that, and then eventually in the second wave it did, and around 5,000 years or so. And what it turns out is that even when it was there, it was not their preferred choice. They still preferred animals, and at that time they were doing some milking and cheese stuff, and but that's one of the little secrets. People say, well, what's
yeah.
That's what they stuff their face with, and but no, what they liked was the convenience of going out in the yard and having an animal there,
Right.
instead of having to chase it down in the forest. So it didn't happen as automatically, and as it wasn't instinctual.
Right.
It wasn't what we preferred, and our species, and it eventually took root. But there are lots of different reasons for that in different parts of the world. I mean, we were really good at what we did, which was killing animals, and so when you start running out of resources, you look for other things. And long before we got into the grains and trying to do agriculture and farming and that kind of thing, is that we would learn to exploit our environment. And so eventually it kind of went more into rivers and more into along the ocean coasts and things like that. And where we were still looking for protein.
Right.
But even then, people say, well, if they were at the beach, they must have been eating fish. Well, it turns out the Max Planck did another study around there after I was back there shooting, and they explained it to me that, well, no,
Really?
they were there, but they weren't bringing up the scallops and the fish and stuff like that, because they still preferred, and they're able to tell this because, again, these nitrogen signatures in the bones of the people that live there, it's not just a theory, that they are able to show that they preferred large herbivores.
No, wow.
So it's really
even over the fish.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
It is really interesting.
Well, yeah, and we were smart, we were able to exploit our environment better than the Neanderthals, which is part of the reason we're still here.
Right.
Did
Neanderthals eat meat though?
Oh yes, they were top level carnivores.
Okay.
And in fact, as people will see in the film, when we go through this whole process and we see the results of the radio isotopic bioanalysis, what they do to make it easy, once again, to create a picture for people, they put it on a piece of paper, and they create what's called a food map. And that map shows, well, down here are all the herbivores, and their nitrogen signature is within this range. And so there's rabbits and deer and all sorts of cute things we think are cute, instead of, back then they thought it was food. And and then higher up you have bears and wolves and Neanderthals eating top level carnivore diets. They weren't interested in plants. And what's interesting, and what I think is really revealing, is that when they take us and add that to that food map, we're right up there with the bears and the wolves. So, and I asked Mike Richards, the professor at the Max Planck, I said, well, did we eat much in the way of plants and things like that?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. No?
I said no, particularly in modern Europe. And part of walking down that football field explains that too, is that, above 40 degrees north latitude, it's cold.
Yes.
We were coming out of the end of another ice age, and you're not going to get a lot of plants, anyway. So,
amazing.
And also, well, yeah, and it was kind of brought up again when I went to Canada which is also in the film, to look at the Namgis, the First Nations peoples of Canada. Well, you would know, you're in Canada.
I'm in Canada. Yeah.
Yes, sharp as a tack.
Yeah.
I should have it up here on my screen. Canada. So, so when I went up there, I was talking to an elder named George,
Yeah.
and he was in his 80s or so, and he said when his grandfather would take him out to forage and things like that, he said, we never went for that stuff. We had salmon and bear and seal and elk, and that kind of stuff is what they went for. And then occasionally, rarely when it was in season, they'd have some greens or some berries or something they picked off the plant, but it's not what they really wanted. And it wasn't until the white guys from Europe got there and started going through their territory, that they started bringing in other kinds of foods. And in fact, the Canadian foods, one of their things that was much treasured is called hooligan grease. And hooligan is a fish. It's also the candlefish, and it's something like a sardine, it looks like. And the Namgis people would capture them every year as they swam by up the river, and they would process them down and turn it into oil, separating off any of the solid matter and the heat. And it would make the oil then, so it would preserve it in a way that they could then store it and eat it through the rest of the year. And it became upwards of 50 to 60% of their diet.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, it was great. They brought it out when I was there, and you take a little piece of dried salmon and you chew on it a little bit to make it soft, and then you stick it in the hooligan grease and eat it. And as it turns out, it was tested, and the breakdown of it is that a lot of people thought, oh well, it'll be like olive oil, but actually it's more like human body fat.
Oh, what?
Which was very interesting. So, and they came to this over thousands of years, just simply intuitively.
Right.
No one came in and said, here's a jar of hooligan grease, and you could put it into sacks and put it under the ground, and it would stay. But that became like money. It was so popular that when trade started, it was very valuable. It was like little sacks of gold.
And they still eat it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Now, the planet's changing, so they're having a little more trouble because there aren't as many fish coming by. But
CJ, maybe we should be marketing that.
There you go.
Serious.
Hooligan grease.
Hooligan grease. This is it. Paleo people, ketos.
Paleo. That's right. You can't get more keto than this. Yeah. It's like human body fat.
Oh.
Little did they know we had Soylent Green going on next door.
Just like your own fat. Just like you're eating your own fat.
All those liposuctions have to be good for something.
Oh, that's so disgusting.
It's so awful.
But this is interesting, because just yesterday I was with my sister, who's as much of a nutrition fanatic as I am, and she's experimenting a lot with the ketogenic diet, as am I. But we were both saying, I said, you know what? I think one day somebody's going to realize that vegetables aren't what they're chalked up to be. And this is the actual conversation we had yesterday. I said, yeah, I think there's going to be something that's going to come out that's going to be like, we aren't actually meant to eat tons of vegetables, because you feel kind of nauseous when you eat them, because they all have somewhat of a bit of a poison in them. So too much is not good of one species of vegetable or fruit. And with the ketogenic diet, because we were saying, like she was saying, the littlest amount of variation and she kicks her out of keto. Like basically she can just eat the greens.
Right.
And so now you're just kind of proving our point a little bit, is that it's not so much that it's bad. I would never say it's bad. I'm just saying that I think we're really missing the boat on the fact that clean, good protein is actually more nutrient dense and more aligned with us genetically than a plant-based diet.
Yeah, we just haven't changed that much over time. I know some folks like to argue that, oh, look, we've got this enzyme, so now we can do, whatever we want. And it's just not true. If you look at the whole concept of where ancestral nutrition came from, it's using evolution as a guide, as the map to what would be optimum for our species. And throughout evolution, until, as you said, the last 10,000 years or so, and in other places of the world only about 5,000 years, is that we didn't eat this stuff. We didn't eat most of the things that are on the shelf in the supermarket. We never ate dairy. Can you imagine going out and trying to capture a wild ox or something that's bigger,
milking it
from Paul Bunyan, who's got 10 foot, from point to point on their horns. It's pretty scary. I try to take that down, and I don't think you're going to last very long.
No.
Well, yeah, but that's just the thing, is that in our day and age, there are a lot of vested interests, that are making a lot of money off of things that have, come along, and and perhaps in many instances they didn't know any better, but now we are learning better. But it's like, even when people first started learning about cigarettes, it's kind of like the pushback and resistance to the change, even though you knew it was killing you,
Right.
was really hard. And even still, it's still a big issue and a big problem, more so
Yeah.
in other parts of the world, I understand.
But there really is no other diet, lifestyle that goes back this far.
Well, no, it's just the thing is that if you define the paleo diet, and I'm not quite sure what you coach your folks on.
Yeah. I do no grains, no beans, no dairy.
There you go. You're one of the closest ones I've ever heard. That's great. Well, see, that's the thing, is that the real paleo diet, what I call the authentic human diet, the authentic paleo diet, if you look at this hard science, it doesn't include, sweet potatoes, even though some people like them. And it doesn't include dairy, and it doesn't include legumes, and once again, like you said, until you start really messing with them and processing them a lot, they're very toxic, things like legumes. Plants don't want to be eaten. Dr. Lane Sebring expressed it to me once. He said, the fruit that they're kind of hanging out there, they want you to eat them, because then you're going to leave them somewhere in a pile of fertilizer, he said.
Right.
and it'll grow into a plant, but then you eat these other things, and the only way they could protect them from predation, from being eaten by other animals of any kind, was to create chemical weapons, basically, because they can't run, except in Disney cartoons. So, so I'm sorry. It's one of those days. I should have had another cup of coffee.
It's great. I love it.
This is the thing. The authentic human diet really is before all of these other things were introduced. And what's also interesting about this hard science is that you can get the bones again from the periods after people started eating this other stuff, and analyze them, and you can tell what they were eating. And it's very revealing, because when we started eating that stuff, we dropped 4 to 6 skeletons. Now we're talking about dropped 4 to 6 inches in height, got weak and brittle bones. We went from being very robust to weak and brittle, our skeletal structure, rotting around the orbits of the eyes. The orbits are, the sockets, basically, and it would be look like cheese.
Wow.
Kind of thing. Yeah. And rotting teeth. And whereas the skeletons and remains they dig up prior to all that, dental caries, you almost never find them. I'm not sure. It's very small incidence. And all these other things is our skulls were solid. We were very robust.
Yeah. What about our brain too? What happened to our brain?
Well, that's just the thing. Part of that arc of becoming human, and by eating these, the meats and the proteins and the particularly the fats from the animals, animal fat, is that our brain grew. I mean, the Leslie Aiello, who's in there, wrote basically the paper on big brain, small guts, and that we evolved over time from having big guts that process more plant matter and things like that, to eating these high nutrient dense packages of food, animals. And when we did that, then there is a ratio for how much energy a body uses and how much they have to take in, and your audience can be very glad I don't remember those numbers exactly. So, but the long and short of it is that it pushed the evolution and the growth of our brains. And at the same time, our guts shrank in order to, because they had this other kind of food available. So as the human species evolved, we have much bigger brains, hopefully smarter.
Yeah.
Well,
isn't it that we kind of, thanks to the animal fat and the protein, that's what really made us human?
It is exactly what made us human. It's what created the evolution to the human species of which we are.
Species.
And and that's something that's often lost. Is that, well, if I like to kid friends that are off on all these different things. And I say, well, if we hadn't done that, if we hadn't eaten all those animals and the animal fats and things like that, we wouldn't be smart enough to be fussing about this.
Yeah.
So, it's like one of the archaeologist from the American Museum of Natural History, in the film, he says, if we had stayed in the trees and we're vegetarians and things like that, he says, I don't think we'd be communicating on this high level.
Right.
We are now.
I agree.
Very PC about that, and so there's actually, interestingly enough, it's a whole other thing, so I won't go down that rabbit hole everyone calls it now, right? Yeah. But it's just, there's kind of actually a de-evolution going on of our species, is that we're not as healthy. No. There's a lot of weaknesses and things that are showing up because we've left our original lifestyle.
Are our brains shrinking now? Do they actually say it's getting?
I don't know what it is.
I don't know that either.
Population. It's. I know that Barry Sears said that the intelligence in mass is sliding.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if that applies more to the younger folks. Not because they're young, but just because they're the children of the people who have continued to eat this thing. So every generation is a little weaker.
Yeah.
And as we all have heard, I suspect, that are interested in health, is that the kids who are the millennials and just before are the first generation that will die sooner than their parents.
Yes, I've heard that too. Yeah.
That kind of thing. So,
yeah. And so just to clarify too, for people that are totally new to this and they're probably going, oh my God, so what am I supposed to do? Run out and just eat nothing but steak for the rest of my life, covered in, what was that fat called?
Hooligan grease.
Hooligan grease to get, my nutrients. We're not talking about conventional meat, are we?
No,
that's
we're not.
A bit different.
Right. So there's a big difference,
Yeah.
Ideally, and if you can afford it and all that kind of stuff financially, is that you want to eat animals that were raised eating the foods they were supposed to eat.
Right. Good.
Is another way of putting it. Is that, and in conventional farming, just because to increase the output to, supply food to more people and stuff, they, feed cows. Is really good example. That foods that they would never eat in nature. They don't eat corn. They don't eat soybeans. In fact, if they don't monitor that very well, they'll kill the animal because it'll ferment differently and their stomachs will explode and all sorts of sad things. So that's the ideal. Now, if in fact, like we talk about with Dr. Sebring, at the end of the film, about the practical applications of all this, is that if you can't get that, you can vastly improve what is available if it's only commercial meats and stuff by, you get the ribeye, you get the meat home and you trim off the commercial fat, which is the stuff that's been highly modified by this change in diet. As you know, pasture raised, grass-fed animals, the fat's very yellow, almost towards butter.
Yes.
And has lots of different nutrients in it. In fact, the omega-3 is higher, something along the lines of salmon, which of course everyone's been hearing about it being something brilliant to add to your diet. And the other pushes the omega-6 window, which apparently is a bad window to go into.
It's the bad one.
Inflammatory and all that.
Yeah.
So but you can trim that, and then you can add in healthy fats. You can do coconut oil. Most people who don't have an autoimmune thing, just from a practical sense, is because you want people to be able to do this.
Yes.
In the world, is they can have Kerrygold butter from Ireland is great, and I don't know if you have it up there, but we have
similar.
Yeah, and Trader Joe's is cheap, and you don't have to go to Whole Foods.
We don't have a Trader's Joe.
You don't?
No.
There must be some equivalent. I don't know what.
I don't know.
But yeah, but there are sources.
There is.
There is. So you have that. You have, raw nuts and seeds, some of that. You can have really good olive oil. There's all sorts of plenty of healthy fats that you can add back.
Absolutely there is. Yeah. I even put grass-fed butter on my steak now all the time, on my grass-fed steak. It's delicious.
Well, no, it is. And interestingly enough, if you become, and I'm sure you've talked about it to your clients and your fans here and stuff, is that, you know, you become a fat burner, you know, not a sugar burner.
Yeah.
And so that's just really good fuel. That's also highly nutritious, you know, that's going to help all the other aspects of your health and well-being.
Yeah. How do you, for you yourself, what's the difference for you between a ketogenic diet and a paleo diet, or is there no difference? Is it basically, we would have been in ketosis, I would think, a lot of the time as hunter-gatherers, right? Well, at least in the winter.
It's interesting that you bring that up because, you know, there's over the first 4 years, which is up until keto, of the paleo diet explosion, there are 100 different versions of paleo. And what is it really? Because everyone wants to squeeze their favorite foods into it and call it paleo. And it's not.
Yeah.
So,
this is my paleo cheesecake.
Right, exactly. And donuts and pies and cookies. You know, here's a quick aside. One of the first things that came out of the movement early on was that you can't be eating a whole jar of almond butter every day because it's bad for you, right? Because then you push the omega-6s again too far. And so they all get an agreement about that. But then all of a sudden it's okay to eat almond meal muffins all day,
yeah.
You know, or pancakes. And I thought, hasn't anybody asked this same question?
Yeah.
it's so, okay. So I got waylaid there. So the authentic human diet that our species was eating is much more keto looking than what is commonly called paleo. And interesting, I think it's interesting, just historically within the movement as it's been here in the US and Canada 5 years, is that paleo comes in. It's kind of like a lot of people adopt it, what would be called strictly, because they really want to get health benefits. Then there's this idea that it's just a template. We don't really know what they ate. So eat whatever you want. And if you do okay on that, fine, you know, and kind of try to widget it in there, you know, and then the people being strict push back a little bit. And then the people who are eating that stuff attack them like, you know, that kind of thing. So that was going back and forth. And then there's, you know, all of a sudden there's, I've got to eat sweet potatoes. How many sweet potatoes can you get away with?
Yeah.
Because you're athletic, you know, and then it's resistant starch, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And if you suggested something that resembled what is now called a ketogenic diet, at that point, they'd say, you're so radical.
Yeah, totally.
You know, what's wrong with you? That's not healthy. You should be eating some potatoes. You should have many more vegetables and all that stuff. And now, in the last less than a year, is that the people that were saying that have adopted the keto message because the keto is popular. And now it's wonderful and it's okay. Before it was, well, it's not just about weight loss, it's about health. Although everything that was often said, lose weight, you know, that's how it works in America anyway, how you sell things.
Oh yeah.
And then, but now it's all embraced as, because it's a weight loss tool. Yeah. And that some people, maybe that's the best thing for them. So it's interesting how the market can drive the acceptance of things that, in all honesty, at least in this little world, is really more accurate from the get-go. It's that we really are meat and fat eaters, you know, and the whole vegetable thing is, if you're eating the really good sources of it, let me qualify that. If you're eating all pasture-raised stuff and little, you know, and chickens and fish and stuff from their sources, and they're not farm-raised being fed orange pellets, you know, and which happens, then you'll do perfectly fine doing keto. Yeah.
And I even think, like, for the people that need to have that variation when they're going from a standard American diet and they're, you know, going into a paleo diet, to have those foods that mimic other foods, like the paleo muffins and things like that to begin with. But I definitely think, like, as you go along in your journey, if you want to keep improving your health and your nutrition, to get closer and closer to kind of getting away all the fluff of the diet. Same with keto. Keto's crazy. You can't tell me that our hunter-gatherers were chugging down MCT oil and butter in their coffee. You know, I had a guy that said, oh, I eat cheese sticks with bacon wrapped around it every day for lunch. And I'm like, yeah, that is not what we would have been doing. That's not the super healthy ketogenic diet. And
Right,
like you
right,
do,
right.
you got to strip it all away. And it's actually really simple. You don't need all the fluff, but for people to start, it's definitely can be a good tool to
Training wheels.
training wheels.
You know,
Yeah.
it's do they still have those? Do people still ride
They
bicycles?
do. Yeah.
So,
Hoverboards now.
yes, hoverboards. So I don't know. No training wheels necessary.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's the thing, is that if you always you want to move towards whatever is optimum, if that's what's driving you. You know, some people that 80% is okay to them, in their lives. And I don't know, I've just always been curious about, well, what could I achieve for myself personally?
Me too.
If I take it to the max.
Yeah.
If I take it as far as I can. And when it comes to real paleo and keto type stuff, my diet looks much more like keto. Yeah. I don't do keto measurements, and I eat lots of fat and meat, and that's really the core of it. I don't drink milk. I do have heavy cream in my coffee.
Yes,
that's my big sin.
We can't go without that, actually.
Yeah. So, but also my tastes change.
Same.
I much prefer savory foods. If I have a little bit of fruit and berries and stuff, preferably when it's in season, which is, one of the other things you were talking about, is that people can get it year round. But that's not how we did it.
Yeah, especially here in Canada. Where are you anyways? Where are you?
Oh, at the moment I'm in Connecticut.
Oh, okay.
So it's cold.
So it's cold. Yeah.
Stuff. But I grew up in Southern California.
Okay.
So, in San Diego. So this stuff, you can get it any time of the year, huge, farmers markets and things like that have become popular now.
Yes.
But the opportunity to really take yourself as far as you can on a physical level towards optimal health is now available, because now we understand it better.
Yeah.
And what's neat about what we found in the film, and a really neat thing about watching the film, is, as you said, is I was inspired by a guy named Peter Jennings, who was a news anchor, Canadian.
Of course.
Who got famous in America, and he became ABC's top news guy. And he started a show long before we had the kind of media that we have now, which was called In Search Of. And they did In Search of Jesus, In Search of this, that, and the other thing. And they would take you along on the journey. You'd go to what's left of Herod's castle, and they would talk about the politics and all of that. So you could get as close to it as you possibly could without leaving your living room. And that was what inspired me too, because originally the movie was called In Search of the Perfect Human Diet.
Okay.
Yeah, and but that was too many characters for I. So that's what I wanted too, is that I wanted people to see for themselves places we went, the people we talked to, and what was revealed along that journey. Because I didn't want to be the person, and I wasn't the person that said, here's what you should be eating.
Yes.
Here's what you ought to do.
Yes.
And even the movie doesn't even end that way. I say, wow, look at what we know now. And maybe someday, it'll also work its way into the larger political environment to help people be healthier and happier. And but if you kind of see where this is going, and it really strikes you, it's something you can start tomorrow.
Yeah.
As I'm sure you do with your clients, is you say, okay, get rid of this, eat these things, and start now.
Yeah.
Today's the day.
Today's the day. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
And
there's so much that happens, because I feel, and I dieted probably since I was 12 years old, on and off every fad diet there was. Same as you. They did the vegan, the vegetarian, the raw, I did everything. And when you start to eat this way, there is not just, weight loss involved. it's everything. Your mind feels different, your skin looks different, your eyes look different, your body on the inside is totally different. You're not, the inflammation goes down, the gut problems go away. There's something to be said about working with your genetics with your food, and there's no other diet out there that does that.
No, you're right. And every once in a while you hear something that's getting close, or they put their own name on it, their own brand on it. But the
Yes.
ones that work in the long time and really do this are based on these same principles.
Yes.
On the evolutionary principles, the ancestral diet type of principles, whether they name that or not. And yeah, it is interesting, and it's really great that we have that knowledge now, before we fall off the edge of the cliff and don't have any other opportunities, But yeah, I think people now are living in a really great time because this kind of information is come forward and is available to them. And with the internet, they can do this. They can work with you. You can help a much broader audience of people, find their way. Because most people need a little hand along the way. They need some guidance to get started, somebody they trust, and to move forward with that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, which is why what you do is a great service, and it's something I probably should have done if I wanted a steady income. So,
which brings me then, CJ, what are you doing now? What are you working on? What do we get next from you? Because that was so fantastic. We need some more.
Oh, well, it's interesting. Since then, of course, the idea of sustainability has been really big.
Yes.
The which is kind of new, but more familiar in some of the paleosphere and the ketosphere, is the idea of regenerative agriculture, where you can, walk the animals across the land, let them do what they're supposed to do, and you can bring back dead land that's turned into a desert into healthy, productive land. But it requires you emulating nature.
Right.
The way it used to be, when the buffalo were running across the United States, and I don't know if you had them, and
yep.
All of that kind of stuff that stirred up the soil, left good nutrients, planted seeds, all that kind of stuff. So there's sustainability, and also the politics of it, and the whole, I think, threat. And I think I don't say it, off the cuff. It's the vegetarian vegan movement is being rather accepted by media and the public and whatnot as, well, gee, that sounds good, so it must be right. And as you and I have experienced and whatnot, is that if you go down that trail, for most people, especially if you don't supplement, right, if you don't have B12 and all those other things, is that your health is going to deteriorate.
Yeah.
And you might feel better right at first because you're not going to Mickey D's every day. McDonald's.
Yes. Yeah. You always feel better when you turn back to whole foods, right? No matter what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's as much as what you're not eating as what you are eating.
Yeah.
But the thing is there's a relentless, we're being pounded by environmental and vegetarian or vegan films that are saying meat is bad. Meat is bad. Raising meat is destroying the planet. It is the number one polluter, all over the world. And the science that is being used to justify this is often inaccurately represented. It has since been disproven, some of it,
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And some of it in the health area and in the environmental area are just out and out lies, but they present it as if they're facts.
Yeah.
And people who are fans or becoming fans because of the emotional way that these are presented, they buy in. They buy in.
Yes.
So
I've seen a lot of that on the Facebook after those films came out, and Forks Over Knives and all these other people were just freaking out. That's it, I'm going vegan.
Yeah, exactly. And the same thing happened recently with What the Health, right?
Yes, that one was,
that one was really big. And before that, Cowspiracy by the same filmmakers who don't, who part of their thing is they don't want animals to be heard. So, which, is in of itself is compassionate, but it's not realistic. Is that, everything on the planet eats something else.
Eat some, yes.
Yeah. And or they don't survive. And there are certain things that we're designed for. There's certain things that they're designed for.
Yeah.
And
so are you going to do a film that's going to disprove all this bullshit?
The working title right now is called Dispelling the Lies.
Oh, okay.
So the short subtitle would be like Animal Food's Real Stories, but it's basically unearthing the truth about human health, sustainability, and the planet, and animal food's relationship to that, right? And I think it's really important because the messages that have been coming out so far, and the ones that are coming from that are saying the same kinds of things, are damaging in of themselves to individuals, but it's also affecting politics, and it's also affecting what the government will recommend, and it's also affecting taxation of products. It's going to affect, it's like, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've lost till it's gone.
Yeah.
And there's people who they're really kind of hiding their head is in the sand, because they're not looking far enough ahead to see, well, it may not hurt me in the next 20 years, but my kids, my friends' kids, their grandkids, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And if you've looked at the supermarket shelves and the health food store shelves, I assume it's the same there.
Yes.
There's a flood of new vegan, vegetarian foods coming in all the time. Now, ultimately, those things displace other things. They've got these fake, soy-based hamburgers. They got meat they're growing in the lab.
So gross. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff. And they're getting places like Whole Foods to put it in the meat counter.
Oh, God.
Meat. And they're trying to create these faux products, and that's another whole show.
Yeah.
so the thing is, there's a bigger picture, a bigger umbrella of damage that's going to come out of this. I mean, Denmark started taxing fat, and they're right across the street from Sweden, who exonerated fat in the courts, right, legally, saying, you can eat that stuff, it's just fine. And so they had a butter shortage. So there's a lot of scary stuff coming down the pike, and
there is, yeah,
and there's at least five that I know of so far, new films like this that are coming out this year. And from our perspective, and another one, and you heard it here first, because I haven't put it up yet on the fundraising site, is that the Cowspiracy people who did What the Health are doing Seaspiracy, S-E-A, Seaspiracy, about, fishing industry, and it basically, like cows, about how that is, again, destroying your health, destroying the planet, yes. And, and these things, when they distribute them, they get late affiliations with some celebrities like DiCaprio and that kind of thing, who also is a big believer in this and has a movie coming out this year as well. But, it's relentless.
Yeah.
It comes out all the time. But then you come over to people with our point of view, and they don't, for whatever reason, the community does not display the same kind of concern and passion for making sure other people know what we know, so they at least have a choice.
Yes.
That there are these the paleo community is very entrepreneurial, very health interested in their own and immediate friends, others, and stuff like that. But, or as like Rob said, and abs, they're more interested in abs than they are in saving the planet. But it's just an observation, right? And the thing is you can be concerned, and you can want to have that out there without becoming a religious fanatic about it. But you have to care enough to want to help get that message out. So, and of course, being in the arts, filmmakers are always saying, please help me, to make this happen. So we at the beginning of a fundraiser, if you want to know about this.
Yeah, definitely.
I started a nonprofit
called
Seize the Day Media, which is the fundraising arm and production arm for the new film and others that will go after a subject such as this. And why nonprofit? Because I wanted people to get tax write-offs instead of T-shirts if they
Right.
and because I thought that was, real, and would last longer in the wash. But oh God, I should stop that. So it's dispellingthelies.org.
Okay.
And also because we wanted to make it very clear, and I wanted to make it clear that we're doing this because it's a social good media organization. It's not just someone who wants to make another film with a point of view, and then also it's just a business. It's that, it's a business. You have to have some of that, or you can't keep in business. You can't make more films.
Yeah.
But if people are going, much of the way that this is done with independent film and documentary is by rallying the public to contribute and make donations and things like that.
Absolutely.
So you can make it and you can put it out in the world. It's kind of a team effort.
Okay.
And so that's what we did. We formed the nonprofit. The initial platform for raising funds is called dispellingthelies.org. Rob Wolf did a video endorsement that's on there, and Justin Nault, who's from a company called Clovis Nutrition, did one there as well. And so far, in just a month or so, it's doing pretty good. It's
good.
$75,000 or something. But
wow,
is that, and I need to write about it more. But real movies cost a lot of money. Not everybody is a 22-year-old that can lay on someone's couch and build it all.
Exactly. Well, I would love to see another film from you, so I'll contribute. I think it would be great. So where can people find you before we're out of time here? So where CJ Hunt's Reports, is that right?
CJ Hunt Reports.
CJHuntReports.com.
Right.
And I will link up to your website so that people can go in. And I'll link up to the fundraiser as well. I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Even I need to do that. So
you still haven't done it. I was on your site. I didn't see anything like that.
No. Just a little announcement at the top. It's just, since I'm not Mr. IT and I don't have a staff.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Yeah. There's only so much we can do.
Yeah, exactly. But it's something that is very close to my heart, and something I think that
close to mine too.
And the community can be passionate about. It's that it's not just learn this, do it for yourself, and walk away. If extend yourself and extend your hand. That's, I guess, one of the things is pay it forward. Help other people at least have the opportunity to see the full picture, the whole story.
Yeah.
And so they can make the best health decisions for themselves. And if they still want to be vegans and stuff, more power to them. But at least know that you got to take supplements. You got to, if you want to do decently on that, there's a little bit more, and that little bit more is informed by our real human diet, so
but I suggest to everybody, of course, to go watch his film on iTunes, because we have seriously just scratched the surface. We probably could have talked for another hour, so I'm going to leave it there because I want everybody to go and watch it and get all this great information that he's put out to the public. And we look forward to your next one, CJ. I can't wait.
Well, thank you. And thanks for telling your audience about it. And I hope that especially after they see the first film, if they want to help get this other one off the ground, they're help very
exactly.
much.
Yes. Yes. I'm sure they will. All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to leave it there.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining me.
You bet.
And we'll talk to you soon.